Wokeness and DEI, race wars, transgenderism and homosexuality, high prices at the pump and the grocery store, religious pluralism, stolen elections, political corruption, government overreach, the regulatory state, abortion, crime, and the list goes on. Does it ever get infuriating to you when you consider how much of our cultural heritage has been thrown away? Do you want a revival of Christendom? Do you get tired of just screaming at the news and feeling anxious or even hopeless? What can we do to truly affect lasting change? It was these questions that plagued one man, and one man has made more of a difference than you could have ever imagined. Tune in with us today as you hear his story and see how this could inspire your own story. Welcome to Everyday Reformation, where we seek to take the many truths of God's Word and apply them to all of God's world. From the family and the church to the public square, Jesus Christ is Lord over all. We need theology that touches everyday life, and we need a reformation that is unfolded in the daily grind of life. The whole counsel of Scripture, the whole course of life, in and through the local church to the glory of our triune God. I'm Brandon Scroggins, pastor of Reformation Baptist Church, joined by Nick Carter, faithful family man, local church member, and more.
Brandon, this is going to be a good one. I know I've said that before, but this is going to be an extension of a lot of conversations that we've had on porches and even in the pews after Sunday and Wednesday night services.
Thank you for joining us at Everyday Reformation. This is a conversation that is the overflow of hours upon hours of conversations, and one that we have needed to have since we started the podcast. So I feel like Sean Ryan. Brian, everyone needs a formal introduction and gets a formal introduction. So here's my best shot at Bryan Dawson, who's joining us. Few people do I love and respect more. Few people, Nick, do we have a deeper friendship with that have impacted us more significantly than Bryan Dawson. And there are so many ways that that has happened. And one of them is Bryan is the one that encouraged us to start a podcast. So here we are, and that's just the low-hanging fruit of many other things. We could do an entire series of podcasts, Bryan, around your story. There are so many things that we could delve into, but we are going to do something inspiring today, I believe. Bryan is a seriously devoted believer in Jesus Christ, very faithful husband, father, a true churchman. He's truly a man of gravitas, a merry warrior. And I can tell you, as his pastor and friend, having known him for so long on a personal level, Nick, Bryan is the real deal.
Amen.
Even when no one is watching, he's so much more under the surface than even you see in public. Highly commend him. Thankful for you, Bryan. And watching what God has done in your family has been phenomenal. Watching how God has worked in your life. And by the way, I think that you started 1819 News as well on the side.
It's a minor detail on the resume. The husband and fathers, I place that higher.
I want to set this up, and then I want to wind you up and just let you go.
Got it.
Israel is enjoying the promised land. Because of their sin and God's discipline, they're exiled. And in the exile, the odds are overwhelming that they would ever see God's promises fulfilled. It's completely daunting in every way, but God provides a way. So they come back to their land from exile. They build the temple, and the response in this monumental feat is that the older men weep because they remember the glory that was to come. So they're looking at this overwhelming, daunting task to be done, and essentially it's to rebuild the ruins, And even the first few steps seem like breadcrumbs in terms of the progress. And the Bible says, don't despise the day of small beginnings. And boy, have we seen that in your life, and it overwhelms me to see what God has done. So before you ever dreamed of starting 1819 News, tell us the story. How did 1819 get off the ground? What happened? We're just assuming that people know who and what 1819 News is at this point, and if you don't, figure it out. What was stirring in your soul? Tell us the story of 1819.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, and this sitting here in the room with you two men is different than telling this story elsewhere with someone else, just because of everything that we've been through in our church and the history of our church and the splits and the chaos and the different trends within kind of the Reformed ecosphere.
Yeah.
All of it plays into it, man. And I think one of the most interesting conversations I had with you, Brandon, I was talking to you, and it was a real big culture in our church prior to the last split we went through. The only way that you could be a godly man is if you were a pastor. That wasn't a culture that we created in our church, but it was the air we were breathing in the kind of the whole Reformed ecosphere. You had the Young Restless Reform movement, you had the Calvinistic kind of movement, and all this stuff started happening. And basically any young man who could articulate the doctrines of grace and maybe interacted with a systematic theology and was a bit articulate, that person thought that they were supposed to be a pastor, and they coveted that position because the only way that you could have gravitas and be respected as a man is if you were in the clergy.
Yeah.
Right. That was just, and again, that's obviously not true, but that was the air we were breathing.
Yeah.
And I desired that. I wanted that because that was the air we were breathing. And again, it's a coveted thing. It's an admired thing. It's a thing that is honored, but it's God's call on a man's life that makes him that.
Mm-hmm.
You can want it all you want, but if you're not called to it, you're not. And I, up to this point, have not been called to that, but I have been called to something else. Right. And when I hear you talk about the trials that we've been through at our church, and I've watched firsthand the things that you've gone through, the only way that you could still be sitting here with me having this conversation, pastoring this church, with us flourishing the way that we are, is if you were called.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so identifying a calling, but a conversation you and I had where this began to change is it was after the COVID stuff and all that was heating up, and we were having a conversation about, like, what historical figure do you kind of see yourself as? Mm-hmm. And we talked about some reformers, and for whatever reason I said George Washington. Mm-hmm. and it was like interesting because we don't usually go there, but my point was that in order for us to win, we're going to have to win outside the church. Mm-hmm. We have great men in we have you as our pastor. What I felt like was needed was someone who was going to engage in this culture war, engage, there is a war that is going on against Christian civilization and our way of life. And I wanted to be able to push back against it. I read Death of the West by Pat Buchanan shortly after I got saved. And that has always just pumped through my veins to be able to fight this cultural onslaught, that's being waged against our people and our history and our heritage and our way of life. I didn't know what it looked like. And so that's kind of the place and point that I remember where it kind of started to form, though not 1819, just but what. And I worked in the realm of media, have worked in the realm of media for the last 11 and a half years. Had no idea why God, I knew I wanted to fight this fight, but I didn't understand that media was actually the way that you fight it, one of the main ways that you can fight it. And I find myself just fortunate to have a job when I moved here. Again, my background, you guys can go look that up somewhere else. I have 6 felonies. I got out of prison, shortly before I moved to Alabama 11 and a half years ago. And I would have been happy flipping burgers or like doing landscaping, but I just so happened to get this job where I was able to work from home, working for a group called USA Radio Networks. And God just granted me success. And I was working from home, didn't require a ton of work, but it was almost like I was going to media school, if you will, like understanding how radio works and all this other stuff. And I was there for a couple of years and had some tremendous success in helping them repackage one of their products. I'm not going to get down into the nitty gritty of it, but God granted me success there, helping them repackage a product and market it to a different audience, and it picked up and it exploded. And from that explosive growth, my name got out into the industry. And in God's providence, the guy that created Laura Ingram's radio show discovered me, a guy by the name of Lee Habib. And after he created Laura Ingram's radio show, he went on to be the vice president of content, where he is to this day, of Salem Radio Networks, where he was Charlie Kirk's boss, he was Dennis Prager's boss, he was Hugh Hewitt's boss, Michael Medved's boss, Bill Bennett's boss. Okay, so this is a very formidable person in this kind of conservative culture war space.
And so God is forming you and even setting you up for opportunities that you didn't even realize at the moment.
Over and over and over again. And that's the calling piece that we talked about. It's like, it's undeniable that there's a calling and an anointing, a preparing, a fulfilling. Like, it's just, I'm just watching it unravel. and I'm along for the ride. And sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's like I would rather be doing anything else than this right now,
Yeah.
And so it has its peaks and valleys like anything else. And so he not only saves me when I'm in prison, gives me the most incredible woman that I was head over heels in love with, who finds me in prison. We get married when I get out, and we now have 7 children. Okay. And then he puts me into this radio path, and then puts me at the feet of one of the greatest media moguls in our nation, who wants to invest in me. And my deal with Lee, because I didn't want to grow people's radio products for the rest of my life. I was just interested in the industry, not just radio, but the whole media ecosphere. And so he calls me, says, hey, I want you to come work for me. I want you to do what you did at USA Radio Networks. I want you to do that for my new show, Our American Stories. And so I went to Oxford, Mississippi, and sat down with him and shared my testimony with him, thinking he was going to run for the hills when he heard about all my felonies. But he said, no, Bryan, you're the exact person I want working for me.
Wow.
He had tears. Him and his wife had tears in their eyes. And I was like, whoa. And so I made a deal with him. I said, look, Lee, I will grow your show, but I want you to teach me everything you know about the media industry. And he just laughs at me. He says, okay, kid, you grow my show. I teach you what I know. And we shook hands, and that was it. And again, you guys were here for all of this, right? Like, this has all happened since I've been a shepherd, a sheep, and you my shepherd.
And one place I've heard you tell this story before, Bryan, World Magazine, I saw where they kind of did an article retelling your story and including some of these elements. But talk about the work of God coming from the most unsuspecting places. In some ways, you would expect this because you have a senator in your family background. But in other ways, you would not expect this. I remember at our previous church having a conversation with Christina, who's now your wife, and she said that she was dating someone. And Christy and I were happy for her. And Christy immediately, tell us about it. Well, he's in prison. And I remember going, no, what are you doing?
Yes, which is the proper response when someone tells you that.
So I think this is all the more inspirational because of what God's done, in the sense that in some ways you were handed a heritage, but in other ways you had to grind this out from the beginning with nothing.
There was a heritage, but there was also massive generational curses on both sides.
Yeah.
Okay, so my dad was born in West Monroe, Louisiana, and grew up with Phil Robertson and the Duck Dynasty crowd, was dirt floor poor back when poor people were skinny, had to hunt for food, and they had a garden. That's how they ate.
Yeah.
And his father wasn't there, right? And so his mom raised him and his 3 siblings, so there was 4 of them, and she raised him, working at a warehouse, making next to nothing, living in basically government housing in West Monroe, Louisiana. And he had no father. And his father was an alcoholic who abused my grandma, his mom, and came from a whole line of people that was what the Dawsons did, that are from Gloucester, Mississippi. You go back and look at the history of the Dawsons in Gloucester, Mississippi. They're running moonshine. They're cheating on their wives. So this is part of that heritage.
Yeah.
Is this. And then on the other side, you've got my grandfather that was the state senator in Colorado, who ran for governor. I'm told. I'm not going into all the details of that, but which seems great. Like, oh, it's like, well, have you met any of the state senators around here in the state? I mean, like, it doesn't mean he's like this illustrious, towering figure of honor and virtue, And he had some issues, and my mom was sexually abused as a child and had a lot of issues and that she never really dealt with. And so when I was with her growing up, she was unable to be a whole person raising whole people, right? She had wounds that she needed to heal and tend to. And so it was just that was generational curses on both sides. And God saw when I was in the pit of a prison in a cell by myself for 23 hours a day with an hour out to take a shower, and make a phone call and go back to my cell. I was in that cell for 4 months, and about 3 months into it, God decided that moment was when he was going to break those generational curses.
Wow.
And open my eyes to the fact that it was my fault that I was in there. Not my father's, not my mother's, not my grandfather's, not my grandmother. Like, it's up to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to take responsibility for my bad decisions, my thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors. And I'm going to chart a different course. And because if my bad decisions created these bad circumstances, that meant I was free to make good decisions that would create good circumstances. And it was this epiphany.
Yeah.
And so I did, and the curses began to break, but it's hard work to break generational curses. And I think generational curses exist everywhere. But I think in our blue collar community, I think in our blue collar church, I think our people understand generational curses more than maybe some more hoity toity
Yeah.
Upper class churches. And so that is on top of all the other resistance to being able to build something or create something. And I think it just shows the hand of God in what's happening all the more.
Mm-hmm.
I never take credit for any of the things that have happened at 1819. I'm along for the ride. It is fun to watch, and like talk about it, but it just happened. And so I'm working for Lee Habib. I'm learning about media. I sat at his feet for 4.5 years, took his show from 80 stations. So how terrestrial radio works is like Rick and Bubba started on a station in Birmingham, and then a station in Montgomery wanted to take it. Well, the moment it was on in 2 markets, on 2 stations, it's now syndicated. And then they wanted it in Huntsville, and then they wanted it in Knoxville. And then, and so you get it on multiple stations, and that's how you grow a show. And so Lee's show was on 80 stations across the country, and I grew it to 330 stations, and we did a deal with Premiere and iHeart, which is as big as it gets in the world. And so in 4.5 years, I learned everything I possibly could from him. It was like going to college, but like had my own like mentor who was like the greatest mind in the industry. And then I, grew his show. And again, I can't tell you how many times, and I don't ever talk about this, I'm sitting at my house in Shorter, just like sending out emails. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is never going to work. And then someone would respond to an email, and it would be this guy at WHO. His name was Mike Dorwart, who's the program director for one of the biggest radio stations in the country that was owned by iHeart. And he just happened to like the show. And I didn't really have to do any sales. I just happened to send him an email, and he happened to listen to it. And then he's like, hey, I think iHeart needs to pay closer attention to this show. And so he puts it on this massive station where Ronald Reagan got his start in Des Moines, Iowa on WHO, where Steve Dace. Yeah. Okay. So,
wow.
Yeah. So this massive station picks up Our American Stories. And what's funny is that KABC in Los Angeles, which is a huge station, picked it up at the same time. And I didn't have anything to do with that. And everyone was so focused on the KABC Los Angeles. And I'm like, I think this WHO deal is going to be bigger for us. Well, a year later, KABC dropped us, whatever. But WHO became like our ambassador to all the other iHeart stations, and iHeart stations just started picking it up, and that plowed the ground for us to be able to go in and do a deal with Premiere and iHeart, which is, again, it does not get any bigger than that.
Wow.
And iHeart ended up picking up the show, taking it, and they're part owner of the show now, and it's the number 10 ranked show in the country.
Wow.
All because of an email I sent. Not because I'm good at sales, not because I just sent the email because it was on my list of emails to send, and poof, it happened. Okay.
And you continued to pound away at it, even when you weren't seeing necessarily the results.
Correct.
You refused to give up.
Correct. And so, and that happens. And by the time the deal with Premiere and iHeart has kind of finally firmed up, Lee, my job with him at that point was now done, because the easiest way to describe my job for Lee was it was a form of sales. I wasn't selling advertising. I was getting radio stations to carry the show. It's called distribution sales. And now iHeart was taking over distribution, which means my job was done. Like iHeart was going to take over my role now. And so Lee, he was never going to fire me or anything, but like, I didn't really have anything to do there anymore. I was like, I kind of want to go do something else. And so he introduces me to Bernie Marcus, who's one of the 4 founders of Home Depot. This is July 2020. And this is big because this plays right into a sermon that you preached as this kind of wraps up. July of 2020, Donald Trump, Bernie Marcus, one of the founders of Home Depot, is trying to help Donald Trump get reelected. If you remember July of 2020, it was an interesting time in our nation's history. It was the summer of love, if you guys remember, with the mostly peaceful protests. It was a mild virus that was going around causing some problems. Okay, and then there was a huge election, right? And so right in the heart of that, I'm now working for the founder of Home Depot. Like, just can't make it up. Like, was just in prison. Now I'm working with the founder of Home Depot, this billionaire, trying to help Donald Trump get reelected. Crazy. And so me and Sarah, the girl who trained me in kind of nonprofit fundraising that worked for Lee as well, we went and had to raise $6 million. We went and raised the $6 million. And then we had to do this massive media-driven get out the vote effort from July to November, blood, sweat, and tears, 80 hours a week, hardest I've ever worked in my entire life until starting 1819. But it was crazy. And it came down to November, and I watched the election get stolen. And I raised all this money from all these people. We worked so hard. It was so, seemed so promising. And I was just like, we can't fix Washington, D.C.
And I remember fury and rage would be lightweight words to compare what you were feeling in the midst of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was literally calling people like, how are we going to form the resistance?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that was me, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm serious. Like, I was like, me and Craig Monger went and marched on the Capitol with our giant American flag. And I remember coming back to my house that day after me and Craig went and marched on the Capitol and said, man, if God would just give us a platform, I feel like we can make a difference. Okay. So that's wild. I forgot about that. So as this is happening, I'm just disgusted with national media, national fundraising, national politics. You can't do anything, right? Your circle of influence and circle of concern, national politics and national media, it's all outside of your circle of influence. It's in your circle of concern. You see it and you're concerned about it, and it causes you to be filled with anxiety, but you can't do anything about it. And so I didn't know what to do. You know, I'm a felon, and I'm just happy to have a job, you know, and I'm like, how can I, you know, I don't know what to do at this point in my career.
And screaming at your TV and screaming at my TV
Correct.
is not getting
It's like,
us anywhere.
And so shortly after that, this is like when all the Michael Foster County Before Country stuff was going on. You're pastoring a church. We had just come off of a church split. We're pastoring us through COVID. Now you're pastoring us through a stolen election. Okay.
Wow.
And it's just a lot. Like it's thick in the air. You can, it's you know, like it's measurable, like tension. Okay. You can grab onto it, and you're having to pastor us through this. And you preached a sermon. I don't remember if the sermon was on it or whatever, but you focused in on, the doctrine of subsidiarity is what you called it. But what it boiled down to was focusing closer to home, right? Fathers fix your families, families be in church, churches make up communities, communities make up cities, cities make up counties, counties make up states. Like, why are we, this is historically how Christians have fought back, is more locally. And I was struck by that. And so I went home and prayed with Christina and said, okay, God, how can I use my gifts, talents, abilities, resources, and relationships to make a difference for my people in place in Alabama? And a week later, the president of the Alabama Policy Institute calls me.
Wow.
Can't make it up, dude. Can't make it up. I pray, God answers. They said, hey, we're getting this radio show in Huntsville. Can you tell us what we need to do? I'm like, yeah, turn left here, turn right there, cross this T, dot that I, just free consultation.
Yeah.
And at the end, he said, you know, what we need more than this radio show in Huntsville is a statewide, state-focused news and multimedia empire to take out AL.com. I said, I'll do it.
You know what's crazy? Before that opportunity even arose, we are talking after church, the three of us and more. I mean, literally until midnight or beyond on Wednesday nights, all day, Sunday and evening, throughout the week, just whenever we're together, about none of those things, but just about how sick and tired we are of what's going on, nothing being done about it, and trying to work out a political theology. I think it's what we were doing, but we had no clue that this is what God would do through it. We're just, what do? We sick of it. And then through all of that, God is preparing something we would have never seen.
Yeah. I never would have thought to start a media outlet. Even the person who was working in media, sitting at the feet of Lee Habib, I was in syndicated radio. I was looking at TV, like I'm looking at all these other mediums, and then they're asking me to essentially start a newspaper. I'm like, bro, I don't even read newspapers. Like, what? But you don't get that phone call and be like, nah, you have to find someone else. You know, I had no idea what I was doing.
All right. So Bryan, I wondered the same thing. I don't know if you remember this, but you were talking about starting a media organization. I thought, what is he going to build, graphics or something? What is he doing? News and journalism. Like newspapers? Do people? I didn't really get it.
Yeah,
I honestly
me
didn't.
neither.
And you continue to talk about it, and we're like, "What's going on over there at the Dawson house?" You had us over for dinner one night, and you showed a clip of you walking across the Bibb Grace Bridge and trying to launch this. You really had a vision, and it was that night. Christy and I left and thought, "He's serious about this."
Yeah.
And for the first time, I have chills saying this. I thought, "This is bigger than I would have imagined."
Yeah.
But it that was quite a bit into this brainchild before it was officially launched.
Yeah, so it began as a brainchild in February. I started full time in July, but it wasn't publicly facing open until October 18th. Right, so it was from February to October. So it was a full 8 months of getting it all on paper. Then in July I hired Eric, was the first person I hired, which is funny, and how that all came about when everyone thought he was, when he brought him to church. That's a whole story we probably don't want to get into on the podcast, but
Eric Kahn and the Hard Men podcast.
Yes. So good times. But it's even crazy to see how God wove us into that with what they're doing in Ogden, and this whole, what the Lord's doing all over with faithful churches like ours, right? And then we got weaved into what he's doing with them and all these other kind of Reformed churches who are doing the same thing. What are we going to do in this current cultural moment? And so, the opportunity to start 1819 News, it came from someone who called me. I was seeking to be faithful, and God called, had someone call me and ask me to do something I had no idea how to do.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll do it. And I figured it out, right? And I figured it out, and I don't know how I figured it out, but and again, that continues to be the pattern and the theme in 1819 in my life. Is he brought my wife to me when I'm in prison. Okay. He brought this opportunity. Like it continues to be the pattern, is I'm praying and God is providing, right. And opening doors and pushing me through things where I don't feel comfortable. And it just over and over and over until it's turned into what it's turned into.
And it's phenomenal because you're the first person I think that I've actually seen in living color to this extent, to where I look at it and I think, thank God for the influence that he's given you, because most of the time it feels like it's the bad guys who have all of the influence.
Sure.
And you just lament, God, why do the bad guys prosper, Psalm 73, and have the influence? And I think, thank God that he did this and set you up. And now senators, congressmen, people from all over, and God has strategically placed you to do what it is we need.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal to look at.
It is. It's, and you think about it, I didn't even really understand to the degree, nor did my donors, nor did, the people who started it. We knew a media organization could be effective in moving the needle, but we had no idea that it was going to rapidly, again, as the Attorney General Steve Marshall has said, we're essentially single-handedly changing the political trajectory of the state. If it wasn't for us, we wouldn't have school choice. We wouldn't have been able to bust these libraries with the and actually get some of these library boards replaced. If it wasn't, just on and on and on. There's so many things, we can get into that here in a little bit, but we had no idea. We knew it would be impactful. We knew it was needed, but we had no idea that we would essentially be able to change the ethos of the state to like a right-wing Christian conservative Christian nationalist, kind of bent now. And now you're going to have a Governor Tuberville coming in. The people running for office are all hardcore right-wing, right? The person running to replace Tommy Tuberville, because he's going to come back and be the governor. The senators running or the future potential senators, the people who are running for that vacant U.S. Senate seat, are Steve Marshall, the Attorney General, right-wing, extremely conservative guy. Congressman Barry Moore, right-wing, conservative guy, Freedom Caucus, Trump endorsed. And then Jared Hudson, former Navy SEAL, hardcore, right-wing, conservative guy. So the only people even running, and that was one of our kind of our dreams and our visions when we started, is we wanted to change the ethos of the state, because I hate democracy, and I can get into that maybe on another podcast. The idea of this kind of one man, one vote, everybody gets to vote. All you have to do is dupe people into voting for you to get power. And so people are willing to pretend to be something that they're not in order to get elected. And so we wanted to create an environment and an ethos where someone had to be an actual genuine and sincere, real proven conservative for them to even be able to run for statewide office. It was kind of like a dream. And now you're seeing it. So at the U.S. Senate position, those people I just listed, then you got Governor Tuberville. Lieutenant governor's position is the only one that's got a few people that are kind of like, one person who's kind of, and then the rest are conservative people. And then at the attorney general's position, you've got Jay Mitchell, Catherine Robertson, and Pamela Casey, all hardcore right-wing conservative people.
Yeah. And
so you're seeing this. And then even when Andrew Sorrell was running against Caroline Dobson, that's still two hardcore right-wing conservative, it's just all the way on down. Yeah. You're seeing that our state is about to move in the direction that it always should have been moving, but there wasn't this mechanism to hold people to account and change that ethos.
Which is perfect. There's 1,000 different places that we could take this conversation, but one of those were ways that not only has the needle moved, but the Overton window has shifted, and those are prime examples of that. And again, I want to reiterate, don't despise the day of small beginnings.
Yeah. So on the Overton window moving thing, that's another way that we need to be thinking about the culture war, is when, I preached at a conference recently, and that was the theme of it, is just telling the truth as divine responsibility. If everyone would just tell the truth, like when you see some horrible thing that offends God happen and you remain silent, right? It's like, no, we need to tell the truth. Like our civilization depends on it, because it does. We can't allow, if you see, just imagine being a dad on the sidelines when there's a man competing as a woman in a female competitive space, and he comes and just, pummels some girl, and there's all these men sitting on the sidelines when and where this is happening. The Leah Thomas thing, where the swimmer comes in and breaks all those girl records, and it's a dude with a penis swimming in a pool in a female. It's just so disgusting.
And no one will say
And no one will say anything. It's like, I'm getting in the pool and drowning that guy. You know what I mean? Like, this is insane. How are men just sitting here watching this happen? And so what's incumbent upon us is to be able to have the courage to do that. So the Overton window is that when someone is willing to go say what everyone is thinking, no matter the consequences that might come, it's a spark of courage. And then you get 2 or 3 to do it. And then you get 4 or 5 to do it. And now it's just expected. Now it's just expected, because we've moved that Overton window. And we've had not only me, but everyone at 1819 is writing stories that we all wish would have been written. But the flack that comes with writing those stories in the beginning, massive resistance, death threats, all this stuff. But now that it's being said, now it's just the water that we swim in.
Yeah. And you've been a shining example of that, because the tendency is to want to play it safe, operate in that Overton window so that you don't get canceled, you don't get socially ostracized. And you've not been reckless in any way, but you have put down your convictions, and you've stood to them, and you've spoke to them, and you've said, let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
And that takes the overcoming of a fear of man with the fear of God, so that you fear no man.
Yeah. The Bubba Copeland situation is what did it. Everybody has their moment. The church split guaranteed turned you into a new man. You had to go through that. You had to learn fear of God versus fear of man. And it can only happen by a fire. You can't learn that lesson just by reading it in a book. And you're like, you know what? I think I'm going to start fearing God more than man. That's not how it works.
Right.
You have to go through hell to learn that lesson. You have to be galvanized by fire to learn that lesson. Okay. And it's not a fun fire. And the Bubba Copeland, just in the very beginning, I remember I posted something on Twitter shortly after I started 1819, and some guy criticized me on Twitter, and I felt like I was going to melt, and I wanted to go into a room and cry, being a bit hyperbolic, but not really. Like, it affected me deeply that this guy would say this about me on Twitter. And now it's like, bro, all I do is get on social media and see people just absolutely going ballistic on me, and it fuels me now. I love it. Right. But in the beginning, it was not that way. So something had to happen. And the way that God prepares his people is through fire, right? Count it all joy, my brothers, when we fall into various trials, right? It's because it talks about testing of your faith, right? And so God uses adversity. I preached on that here at the church. God uses adversity to shape and mold us. And man, there was probably the 2 hardest things I've been through since starting 1819 News. First was the Bubba Copeland situation, and that affected our church very deeply. When this guy who was a quote unquote pastor, right? There's air quotes, pastor, a pastor of First Baptist Church, Phoenix City, who was also the mayor of Smith Station, who was living a double life as an online trans porn star, writing homoerotic slasher fiction, as a double public figure, writing on public forums, about some of the most sick, vile, disgusting things you could ever imagine.
And the centerpiece to this story is often left out, is that he was directly alluring children into all of this stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, the memes, the meme is what caused us to go ahead with the story, because he was taking pictures of children in the community, and we didn't know this until we wrote the story, and someone called us and was like, hey, those are my kids. Can you take that down? We're like, oh God. But he made a meme where he was encouraging children to transition their gender. Right. And one of them was it was a 14-year-old boy, and it looked like it transitioned into this girl. Well, it was really a boy and his sister from the community, and he was taking pictures of them and putting them online. It was just so sick. I mean, we could do the rest of the podcast just on the sick things that he was doing. And again, there's not a media outlet in the country that would have taken this on, okay, and written about this. But here it is. We cannot do it and let this guy continue to do God knows what with these children at this church and these children in the community, and them continue to be harmed. This is just, you as a man, when you see the situation, you know what's going on. You may not have the evidence to be able to connect all the dots to win in trial, but buddy, where there's smoke, there's fire, and there was some sexual abuse smoke going on. And then after we did the first story, then came the phone calls of the women,
Mhm.
right? And then they started saying, yeah, he did this to me and he did, and you're like, whoa. And then none of them would go on record, so we couldn't use that in our stories. And so anyway, we continued on, and and finally the last story. So he got in a pulpit. So we did the story Wednesday morning, and Wednesday night, he got into the pulpit as a pastor and defended himself and downplayed it. And so that was too much. And so we dripped out 3 or 4 more stories, with the last one being this homoerotic slasher fiction that he was writing, where he was talking about a real woman in his community by name, in the name of her business, saying he was going to stalk her and mimic her every move and kill her so that he could have sex with her husband, right?
Mm.
That guy was running around free because no one had the courage to say anything. All kinds of people knew this was going on, and no one had the courage to say anything. And so we wrote that last story. It published at 2 p.m. on a Friday. We were actually out at Fort Toulouse.
Yeah, I remember like it was yesterday.
We were at Fort Toulouse, and I saw the story, and then a couple hours after we published the story, the Lee County Sheriffs went to go do a wellness check on him, and they went to pull him over, and he ended up fleeing, and they got in a chase, and the chase came to an end with him waving his pistol around, saying he's not going to take this blank, and then put the gun to his head and shot himself. And the fallout from that was that 1819 News got blamed for that. Bryan Dawson got blamed for that. Craig Monger got blamed for that by the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Daily Beast, the Guardian. These massive, the biggest media outlets in the world were essentially blaming me and Craig and Jeff in 1819 for killing this guy. And so all of the left-wing, purple-haired, nose ring, fat, lesbian, whatever monsters down just on the keyboard, going to town, doing all this research on us and finding my home address and pictures of my family and posting it all over, talking about killing my children, and, went through that. And then that went on for 3 weeks, man, 3 weeks, every single day being front page news on these massive media outlets and people coming after us and going after Craig. And, and then you remember when Craig got up in the pulpit, or not in the pulpit, he got up because he was leading music at that time, and he couldn't even lead music. He just broke down in tears. It was that was rough. Okay.
You're drawing all of the right enemies.
Yeah.
But God is testing you. And as we've heard before, oftentimes we think because we're getting fire, we're in the wrong place, but it could mean that we're right over the target.
Correct.
And you were right over the target.
And that is, and God had to develop me as the leader and then us as the organization to be able to continually stay over the target. And when you're over the target, shrapnel and bullets and bombs and everything is flying at you. And in order to win, we have to stay over the target. We cannot get distracted. And you can't have the courage to fly that low and receive that much, anti-aircraft artillery, whatever you want to call it, to keep the metaphor going, except by doing it.
Yeah.
And so he pulled me out of prison, prepared me for this, started the whole thing, launched it, put me into a position that I didn't even have the courage to be in, and formed me through that fire. Okay. And then the next crazy thing is when we hosted Tucker Carlson, we signed him in like April, and he was just the biggest media personality in the world with there was zero controversy, zero. Yeah. We signed him, and then it gets into June, and he has that conversation with Ted Cruz, where Ted Cruz is like, oh, if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. And if you curse Israel, you'll be cursed. And he's like, where's that in the Bible? Right. And he just goes scorched earth on Ted Cruz. And now Tucker's the most controversial figure on the planet. And we had signed a contract with him, and he was going to be our speaker. And by the way, I loved the Ted Cruz podcast. And so, but a bunch of people didn't. And a bunch of those people happened to be funding us.
Pressure to cancel.
And the pressure to cancel came.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't speak until November. From June to November, we had the most controversial person all over in the country, all over our website as our featured speaker. And donors were reaching out, cussing us out, telling us that we, da-da-da-da-da. I mean, it was freaking brutal. It was brutal.
Cave or
and
not
we were
cave.
like, I will die before I cave. I will die before I cave. I'm not doing it. If it's just me and Tucker in that room together and he's speaking to me, we're doing the event, right? That's it. And man, then the person whose private jet we used to go pick Tucker up, he's getting calls. And then the donors afterwards are getting calls from Jewish billionaires telling them that they were anti-Semitic for supporting me and all this other stuff. Man, it was wild.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about you, Bryan. I've known this as a personal friend, pastor, seeing your family. I've seen you change your mind on things when
Yeah.
confronted over issues, and you shift, you rethink. You're not bullheaded in the worst sense of the word. You'll reevaluate. Look,
Yeah.
but when you put your stakes down and your convictions are formed and they're in the ground, and you've considered the playing field, you're going hard,
Yeah.
and you're not shifting course.
Yeah.
And Nick, I think one of many takeaways that I have from this is many of our listeners probably are not going to be put in this sort of situation exactly, but all of us are going to be put in situations like this. And I would imagine, Bryan, you've seen this, whether it's a United States senator, whether it's a pastor, a plumber, whether it's a faithful father, whoever it is. God is forming you and preparing you for a work, regardless of what it is. And there's a point in time in which your mettle is tested.
Yep.
METTLE. Look it up. The inner constitution of your convictions and which way are you going to go? And you've had that experience, and so the matter there is, am I going to give way when the pressure's thick, or am I not?
Yeah.
And I think that determines the rest of the trajectory.
Yep. Yeah. Everyone's going to have that moment. Every father, every pastor, every head of any institution, and every husband and father is the head of an institution.
Yeah.
The most important institution. I want to get into that. But then the head of a church, you had your mettle tested through the church split, through COVID, through the race issues, through the revoice, through the stolen election, through the, and what Brandon's mettle is like, I'm going to go get this giant stack of books that was floor to ceiling on our Christian political heritage.
Yeah.
And he studied it and studied it and studied it and studied it and went and learned and then held the line. So much so that World Magazine did an article on you about holding the line when all these other churches were caving. And so we are all going to have that moment where we're tested. And I would encourage people, there's a little bit of a Yosemite Sam cowboy that has to be present in order to hold the line when it's tough. But also you don't have to be an idiot, okay? You don't have to be an idiot and just go draw lines that just draw lines wherever and then hold lines that don't need to be held. As the head of your home, figure out where your lines are.
Yeah.
Draw those lines and then evaluate those lines regularly with courage and prayer. But once you've drawn your lines, don't move them.
Yeah.
Okay. And until it's like, okay, I've learned this new thing and I feel differently about it. Right. Because, we were all cage stage Calvinists, and so there's a tendency for us to draw lines that are unnecessary based off some new doctrine or something that we studied. But, we're not gonna allow our daughters to compete in sports that have a martial aspect to them.
Right.
So just these different things where you're gonna draw the line, or if some, I think one is where people said, if you don't take this vaccine, you're gonna get fired.
Right.
The people that went ahead and got fired, like those are your lines. And I don't fault anybody for caving in that situation, but those moments happen. That really happened. And no matter what anybody chose to do there, it's not that you're like anathema because you failed this test, but just know that that's not going to be the last test. That's not going to be the last one. Okay. And they're coming again.
The tendency is to really put our stakes in the ground and then keep moving the line.
Yeah.
And moving the line and moving the line until there really are no lines.
Correct. Yeah. And I love what Andrew Isker says, when he talks about our nation, and you got all these guys that are like, yeah, I got my guns. And when they come for my guns, I'm going to run the line. They come for my guns. I'm going to shoot them back. And it's like, dude, they're cutting kids' penises off. Dude, you ain't doing nothing.
Right.
You ain't doing anything.
Right.
And so overall, this kind of redneck, don't tread on me community ain't doing nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. It's going to be fathers. It's going to be churches. It's going to be those people who draw the lines and hold them. Because these, you got my beer in my truck and I'm a man and shooting my guns like that. Those guys have not held the line on anything.
Yeah.
Okay. And they just continue to send their kids to public schools and watch them get completely annihilated by the culture. And like, you ain't take my guns though. Doesn't matter, dude. Like that. Like, so your line means nothing.
There's nothing.
You have to draw real lines that are actually where they're really coming, and then hold those lines if you want to have my respect. Right. So
I want to shift gears a bit. We talk a lot in our church and in this podcast about being faithful fathers and mothers and children, the domestic sphere of the family. We talk a lot about the church. We have seen in your life, it was those underpinnings of family, fatherhood, and then proper view and of the church and being a faithful churchman. It was those two spheres that really anchored you to be able to go and do what you do in the cultural sphere. because without those, you're adrift at sea. Those foundational units have to be there. Here's what I want to shift gears just a little bit. So it's easy to focus on those two spheres, family and church, but then never really get to the other, which can form a sense of pietism in the worst sense of the word. So let's move from family and church. Let's continue into that cultural arena. Bryan, what do you say to Christians who are hesitant or even resistant to jump into the area of politics and the quote unquote culture war?
The reason that you look out upon this land and it's unrecognizable is because Christians have abandoned their post in the culture war, period.
Yeah.
Christians have never not been on the front lines. The American War for Independence, it was Presbyterian pastors in black robes who were preaching fire and thunder from the pulpit, recruiting troops to go and fight, right? That's where we've been. You go back to just the history of Christianity. It was always Christians holding the line, and it used to be because that everyone was Christians. I mean, not everyone, but like when you live in a Christian civilization and people are, let's you go back to like King Alfred or something, and I want to get back to that, but the reason that our society and civilization looks the way that it does is that the people who hold the gold standard, which is the Christian standard, have abandoned the culture war, and we've been and Eric Metaxas calls it the idol of evangelism. And it's like, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
Well, what he means by that is evangelism is a good thing. Usually the idol that we're worshiping is a good thing. But if the idol of evangelism is, well, if I make this stand politically or culturally, which it's not politically or culturally, you're making a biblical stand, but that biblical stand could be perceived as cultural or political, then I won't be able to evangelize. Then I won't be able to evangelize. I'll lose my witness.
The world is watching.
I'll lose my witness. And I made this stand against homosexuality or trans, and now this person thinks I'm mean, so they won't hear me preaching the gospel. That person isn't going to listen to you anyway. And as a matter of fact, it's actually the countercultural nature of a Christian that makes his witness stronger. When you have a man who has a bunch of kids and his kids are all believers, and this person is going to war with the culture, there's something distinct and different about him. And if the Lord begins to work in a person's heart, he's not going to go to the guy who's soft and cowering on everything. He's going to go to the guy that's like, wow, there's something different about him. Tell me about this Jesus you believe in. Tell me about this conquering king that you worship. Right. And so Christians, it's literally our fault. Okay. Kids are getting, I keep bringing that one up because it's just so heinous that the transgender movement is our fault. Rampant homosexuality is our fault. Rampant promiscuity is our fault. No-fault divorce is our fault. 67 million babies murdered in the United States of America through abortion and Roe versus Wade is our fault. No Christian should ever put up with these things. A Christian civilization should never have these things, but we bought into this lie, this myth of neutrality, that government is somehow this sacrosanct space of neutrality, right? And it's of course what Pastor Doug Wilson says, it's not whether but which, right? It's not whether a civilization will and a society will have a God. It's which God.
No neutral space.
There's no neutral space. It will either be Christ or it will be some demon God. Okay. And right now we call it secularism and atheism, and those sound neutral. Did you know there's no difference between secular humanism, atheism, Satanism, communism, Marxism, progressivism, Bolshevism? It's all the same thing. It's all anti-Christ at its root. It's all about destroying what Christ and his kingdom, which is Christendom, where Christ has dominion is Christendom. And another word for Christendom is Western civilization. And so when the enemy wants to destroy, so you think about Paul Harvey, If I Was the Devil, remember that? And then C.S. Lewis in the Screw Tape Letters. Put yourself in the position of the devil. And if you were going to go to war with Christ, how would you do it? Well, the only way that the enemy can go, man, this is a whole thing that I want to write like a book on. But when you understand what Western civilization is and what Christian civilization is, it's the outworking of the gospel. When Christ rose from the dead, it wasn't just so that you could invite him into his heart, or excuse me, that you would invite him into your heart and that you have a ticket that punched and you get to go to heaven. What ended up happening is that all of these people got saved, and then there was a dispersion. And they went into the Roman Empire. It wasn't the Holy Roman Empire. It was the Roman Empire. And within 200 years, the Roman Empire Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. And then it spread off into Europe, and it became the official religion of Europe. And then it came across the Atlantic Ocean, and they planted the flag of Christ on this continent. And then they came and they colonized this continent. And it started with families and churches and schools, and then a little government. And they were called colonies.
Mm-hmm.
And the overflow of these colonies on this continent became Harvard, Princeton, Yale, hospitals, all of this incredible things. And it was all for the glory of Christ and the expansion of his kingdom. That's what the Mayflower Compact says. We don't have to wonder why those people jumped in a boat and crossed an ocean and risked everything and planted the flag of Christ.
They told us.
They told us it was for the glory of Christ and his king and the expansion of his kingdom. That's why they came here. So the outworking of the gospel is Christian civilization. So if you're Satan and you want to go to war against Christ, you have to go to war against his kingdom and his people. Okay? You cannot separate a people from their civilization. And so what's happened is that we're not claiming this civilization as our own. And so when we see it getting destroyed, we have no skin in that game.
Mm-hmm.
But it is. It is ours. Just because we say it's not ours, we don't feel like it's ours, doesn't mean that it's not. It is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to come back to an understanding of what civilization is and that it's completely tied to the gospel and his people. And so there's a war against Christian civilization. There's a war against Christendom. And that is what Satan is doing. And it's specifically, and I'm writing on this right now, it's the tip of it is the war on the Christian family. Because it's family. Family is the basic unit that undergirds all of it. And so it's church and family, but ultimately a church is a family of families, right? And so the family unit is the nuclear power plant of culture, of handing down our values, our heritage, our customs, our religion. It is the nuclear power plant of Christian civilization, is the Christian family. And the Christian family is under attack. You think about everything that's going on in the culture war is an attack on family formation, on fruitfulness, birth control, abortion, right? Family formation, promiscuity, homosexuality. All of this stuff is destroying the family, because the family is the atom, okay? It's the individual rock placed in the wall of our wall that we're trying to rebuild, if you will. Man, I wish we had more time, because this is an area I could just go and go and go on. But that's Christian. Know who your fathers were. Know what this civilization is, and engage in it. You have to, because when you don't, I mean, by allowing this stuff to happen, by not fighting, you know, we're required to leave our children an inheritance. You talked about that today in the sermon. And that inheritance is not just financial. And it says it's not just your children, it's your children's children. Okay. And so it's saying you generationally. And so we're required to leave our children and our children's children an inheritance. And it's not just financial, right? It's like, yes, we should strive to give them a family farm and not a pocket knife. Like we should be, you know, like we should want that for our children. Okay. We should want that. But if they don't have a spiritual inheritance, they'll squander the financial one. So it needs to be a spiritual, it needs to be financial, but it also needs to be civilizational. What are we doing to leave them a place worth fighting for themselves? Because that has not been done. Our our father's generation, right? The boomer generation and even before them allowed this to happen in our nation. And this is no longer a nation that feels like it's even worth fighting for to many, right? That kids can't, they don't feel like they can afford to get married. They don't feel like they can afford to have kids. They don't feel like they can afford to buy a home. It's absolute horrible. And again, it's an unrecognizable civilization than what it was 20 years ago. We've allowed this to happen, and that's a sin against our children and grandchildren, right? And it's wrapped up in piety and modern evangelicalism. Well, I think we should accept the refugee, and you're sinning against God and his kingdom and your children. That's what's happening when you want to invite and accept the refugee. You can be really nice to them and treat them decently as you load them up on a plane and send them home. I'm not saying you need to throw rocks at them and be mean to them. You can love them all the way onto the bus.
Isn't it striking how the arrows of hell are coming right at the heart of everything that's most valuable before God? A man's marriage, a man's work, a man's money, a man's family. And then the civilizational heritage that we're squandering. Let's bring all of this together to a close with this question. And this question is particularly designed for you, Bryan, because of where you've come from, where you are. It's a question that is very general and broad, but to me, it comes with so much more weight coming from you because of what you've done in terms of your own family and our church, how instrumental that you've been in that. But you are on the front lines of the culture war, of politics in our state. What can the everyday Christian do to get into this fight? We know that it starts at home, in our local churches, having our ear to the ground in terms of our local communities and counties and state. but you see so much more than any of what we see in terms of what we're up against. And my sense is that it's way worse than we even realize. So, what can the everyday Christian do to get into this cultural fight?
This is my favorite question, and it's the question I received. Well, Bryan, what can I do?
Mhm.
Bryan, what can I do? Can I come work for you at 1819? No. Are we, like that? There's a lot more people in Alabama than there are at 1819, right? We have
Right.
like 22 people that work for us, and there's millions that live in the state. So no. Should I start my own thing? Should I start a podcast? Should I go knock doors? Should I? It's like those are all good
Right.
things. I'm not going to stop you from doing those things, but we there's people once they come to a realization of how bad things are, and their immediate desire is to put on the Rambo war paint, and they want to like jump out of a plane with a parachute and just start shooting people that are the enemy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a war. This war is every bit as real as World War II and the beaches of Normandy and the Battle of Iwo Jima. This battle is every bit as real and as consequential, but it's being fought differently.
Mm.
And when we get back to the fact that what we are doing in 1819, we're a statewide, state-focused news and multimedia empire with the, I wouldn't say an empire. We're on the way of being an empire. That's our goal. Okay, so that's our vision. And with the express purpose of taking out AL.com as a media out of record. That might be one way of saying what we are. But the better way of saying what we are is we're a Christian ministry who's dedicated to preserving our way of life and fighting for our civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we understand that what we're fighting for is a kingdom, okay, where Christ has dominion, it's a kingdom, and his kingdom, and I'm going to get a little bit post-millennial, sorry, I'm going to go into a little bit of my eschatological view. I believe in the Lord's Prayer, it says, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." What that means is his heaven in heaven, Christ's rule is perfectly recognized. There's perfect faithfulness, perfect obedience is what's in heaven. And what he's saying is that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. His rule, his kingdom comes to earth through faithful obedience, covenant obedience to his word. Okay. And so wherever there's a covenant body being faithful and being obedient, his kingdom is on this earth. And what Christendom was all these Christian nations who were being faithful and obedient, not perfect, but they recognized Christ's lordship. He's seated at the right hand of the Father, righteously ruling over all things right now. And his rule is it's on earth as it is in heaven, where that rule and authority is recognized and laws are set up and put in place that respect who he is. We make decisions as governing bodies that honor him, and we think about him when we make decisions as fathers, as pastors, as governors, as presidents, whatever. And so what does that mean, person listening to this podcast who's saying, "Bryan, what can I do? Bryan, what can I do?" This fight, if only two things, and we need to pay attention to politics. We need to pay attention to what's going on. We need to be aware. We need to know about our Christian heritage, our uniquely Western European Christian heritage and our ancestors and the way that they fought for civilization, the civilization that they built. And we need to be engaged in the political process. We can't disengage from it, but we also can't abandon the most fundamental. We can't abandon our family to go knock doors. I know people who are literally out knocking doors, who are involved in politics and all this other stuff. They're uber engaged in the political realm, but they're sending their children to public school like right now.
Right.
Like right now. It's like whoa.
Right.
Put down the politics and pick up your family.
First
right?
things first.
Yes. And so we have to keep our eye to the political. Like, Nick, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Your stage of life, where you are right now, your children are grown, they're out of the home, and you're now entering into this space. You're doing it exactly the way that it should be done, okay? But there's people who, if you have a wife and you have children in the home, the loving your wife and ordering your home and training your children in the faith, like every day that you get up and you have a family and you get up and you go to work and the curse makes it hard to be able to provide for your families. It says through thorns and thistles and the sweat of your brow, you'll be able to provide. And for the woman who's in the home, and it says through the pain of childbearing, right, you'll bring forth life into this world, and it's going to suck. and work is going to suck and submitting to your husband is going to suck. It's all in there. It's all in Genesis. Okay.
Yeah.
And so every time a husband gets up at 4:30 in the morning and he gets in his truck and he drives to work and he goes and he works through by the sweat of his brow through thorns and thistles to provide for his family, he is beating back the forces of darkness and he is winning and waging war against the enemies of Christ.
Amen.
And I get choked up and almost want to cry saying this because it's every wife who's come home and put aside this desire and pursuit to be relevant in the realm of work and all this other space. And she comes home every time she submits to her husband when she doesn't want to and submits to his authority. She is winning. Okay. The world, the flesh, and the devil are going to want to resist you doing the very thing that God commands. And so when you submit to your husband, when you change diapers, when you do laundry, this laundry mountain that never seems like it's ever going to end, and you continue to spank the kids and you're trying to catechize them and they're just impossible to wrangle. Every single day when you wake up and your toes touch the ground and you hit your knees and pray and you nurture the children in your home that God has given them and you love them and you feed them and you change their diapers and you clean up the pee and you poop and the puke and all of the things that come with it and the chaos and everything.
It matters.
You're doing that, and that is you literally waging war against the forces of darkness is by you doing that. Because the world, the flesh, and the devil would have you doing anything but that. Same with a man. The world, the flesh, and the devil would have him playing video games, looking at porn, and smoking pot instead of going and providing through the sweat of his brow and thorns and thistles, right? Like anything but that. And to the woman would be an absolute pain of a wife who doesn't submit, who would rather be out in the workforce and ignoring her kids and paying someone else to raise them. That's what the world, the flesh, and the devil wants. So when we just obey his commands, when we are covenantally faithful, we are waging cultural warfare. And if we would just think about this, the world tells you this Malthusian ethic in the world, you should only have 2 children. Boy for me, girl for you, praise the Lord, thank God we're through, right? That's the culture. That's the world, that's the flesh, that's the devil, if you even have to. And we're saying, have as many as the Lord will give you. And of course, it's like, well, of course, you say the rule and then here comes the exceptions. It's like, yes, there's reasons that you should space your children out, all these other things. I'm not going to get into that. But there's only one pattern in the scripture about children, and it's that they're good and that they're a blessing, whether it's Psalm 127, 128, Genesis to Revelation. There's only one thing about children. It's that they're a blessing. And the only way that there's a blessing is if you train them. So have as many children as the Lord would give you, train them and discipline them, train them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. The discipline and instruction of the Lord is the nutheteo and paideia. The nutheteo is a father coming in and correcting his children, and the paideia is the enculturation of bringing them into the Christian faith. And so we're disciplining our children and we're enculturating them into the Christian faith. And we're doing that in Genesis 6, Deuteronomy 6. We teach our children about God and his law when we sit in our house, when we walk by the way, when we lie down, and when we rise. We're always. And so this is the war. And the world, the flesh, and the devil would have you doing everything but this. And the outworking of this is it's a church full of families that are doing this, and a church that's teaching them how to do this and helping them to do this.
Yeah.
And once you get these things, and so the reason that I want to dive into this is 5 years of doing this before God put 18, 19 in my life. I had no idea what I was doing. I knew I wanted to have lots of kids, but then I had like 3 and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm super uncomfortable being at home around my wife because I don't feel like I'm fulfilling my responsibilities because I wasn't. And I just felt uncomfortable. And so I would leave and we would go, I would go visit people at the hospital. Matter of fact, we came and saw you and Ashley at the hospital once when I was in this mode. And I would just, whatever I could do to leave my home and go preach the gospel at some drug addiction rehab or go preach the gospel here, or go to a homeless shelter and preach the gospel. I would leave because I wasn't comfortable in the home doing my job there because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was basically thought I was God's gift to ministry, and I was basically Billy Graham, right? I felt that way about myself, and I got home and I found out that my wife didn't agree. And I knew that she didn't because she was doing dishes loudly and cabinets were slamming, etc. And I was like, okay. So I said, what's wrong? And I knew I was in trouble when she said nothing. That's when you really know you're in for it. And so was able to finally get it out of her, and she spun around and put her finger in my chest and said, you want to preach the Bible and the gospel to every person on the planet but your wife and children. And I was struck by that. And I went back to the room and I got on my knees and prayed and said, God, I need your help. And again, you'll see a pattern in my life. I prayed, and 2 weeks later, I met Dr. Tom Ford.
Yeah.
And basically grabbed onto his leg and said, teach me everything you know. And I spent about 5 years from that moment to starting 1819 News. I spent 5 years. We lived in a tiny house. Okay. You guys know that. You'd been there. Lived in a tiny house in Shorter, Alabama. That was a 1,400 square foot house with 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. And we had 5 children for the most of the time that we were there. Living there, and I worked, and I had a job that was somewhat rewarding, not really. But it allowed me to be home. It allowed me to read these books and listen to these podcasts on how to be a husband and a father and develop this theology of the family and learn from other men and travel and go to conferences where I could learn about this stuff. And so for 5 years, I ordered my home, and I got it to where this was right. And once that happened, then and only then did God open the door for 1819 News. And had I tried to start 1819 News without doing that, I would be divorced, sleeping under a bridge somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to do things in that order. And so, Bryan, what can I do? I don't know what the Lord has for you. And it goes back to his revealed will versus his hidden will. He has his revealed will. And I would say that loving your wife, and for wives, love your husbands. Respect your husbands. I'm not going to get into that, but spouses, okay, love each other, train your children, be faithful. If you don't have children, you have grandchildren, help there, but be faithful where the Lord is telling you to be faithful. Be faithful there, and only once you're faithful there will you begin to see God's hidden will for your life.
Yeah.
But don't be expecting God to come in like the 82nd Airborne and just poof, do some magical thing in your life if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing in these most basic duties. But it really is, man. And it's the day in, day out adversity of being a husband and father, and of being a wife and a mother, and having children and training them in the faith. There's enough adversity in that can keep you busy and keep you getting shaped and molded to God, and then teaching them about politics and about culture. And you're raising up these children. And if we would do that, and churches would focus on that,
yeah.
And if we had the church and the family, these two culture shaping pistons in this motor of engine, this engine or motor of cultural shaping, church and family doing what they're supposed to be doing, these two pistons, in 40 years we win. In 40 years we win.
Yeah.
But we just refuse to do these two things.
Yeah.
We refuse to do these two things. And we
want to do everything else
but those two things. Correct.
And then the overflow of that could be 1,000 conversations between Christians starting businesses, buying property, engaging in local community life, which comes in 1,000 different forms, getting involved in local communities, boards, whatever it is. But one way that we could pinpoint, building on the foundation of all of the things you just said, is supporting the faithful work of potentially good and godly candidates, good ministry, good organizations. And Bryan, one thing that really stands out from our conversations is that, in a sense, it really does believe that it really does seem like conservatives deserve every bad thing that comes to them, because we're not willing to support and throw our weight behind when we see God doing something. We want to nitpick, do our own thing instead of unite and rally. And the left is funding left and right.
Yeah.
So I would be a strong advocate of supporting the work of 1819 News, getting in that fight by getting behind what you're doing and putting gas in the car so that it can continue to run and go. And that's something the right and conservatives need to do a better job about. When you can't be the one starting it or running or whatever it is, get behind and support those who can and who are.
Amen. And some people's gift may be starting a business that makes tons of money that can then support other endeavors, right? And again, a guy who starts a business and hires Christian people and pays them a wage so that their wife can stay home, that's way cooler than what I'm doing, right? Well, I guess I get to do that as well. But that's that's how we need to be thinking. Okay. And so, some people's gift may be that so that they can support. Some people may be doing the thing, and some, it may just be that you're an employee at a company and you get to love your wife and train your kids and you die that way. That's okay too, but be faithful.
If you can build your own car and run with it, do it. But I count it a privilege to be able to put gas in yours because I like where it's going.
Thank you.
As we begin to land this plane, any closing thoughts, Nick, Bryan?
I mean, that's the biggest one, but I want to go back to something the way you opened, you talked about rebuilding the walls. Okay, and so we go back and we look at when Ezra and Nehemiah came back after Babylonian captivity to rebuild the walls of Christendom and then rebuild the temple. It looked utterly hopeless, and there was no chance. And it feels right now, it feels like it's utterly hopeless and that there's no chance. There's too many ruins. There's too many enemies. It's this, they want to kill us. We can't win. But the last time God's people felt hopeless was not with Ezra and Nehemiah. You can go back through the history of God's people, the church and Western civilization, and time and time and time again, it seemed hopeless where Christendom. And so I would encourage people to go back and study the history of God's people in the Bible, which was ancient Israel. Okay. But then the modern Israel is the Christian church. Okay. So not the nation state of Israel in 1948, but the Israel of God are those who believe in him. And that story continues after the New Testament. And so study who was King Alfred, what were the Crusades. Okay. Because it seemed hopeless for God's people over and over and over again. And through insurmountable odds, in God's providence, he took his people who were faithful and filled with courage and did the unthinkable and the impossible to bring victory to his people, and that his people got to continue and not only survive, but thrive.
A book that we'll be giving to all of our men in just a few weeks, The White Horse King by Ben Merkle. Highly recommended. Nick, closing thoughts?
Yeah, the resounding thing I keep hearing over and over, we can't all be CEOs, founders of a empire media organization or a mega pastor or anything else. But one key idea, or what we continue to talk about every podcast, is being faithful where God has you at that time, and allow him, and through your faithfulness, those doors will open, or that we are starting to change the culture war.
Amen. And with that, may we continue to be the church reformed and always being reformed according to the word of God. Bryan, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the life's work that you've invested yourself in. And thank you for joining us at Everyday Reformation. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube Music, and all of your major podcast platforms. Feel free to send us questions or thoughts about today's episode. Thank you for joining us.